This hard rock group managed to survive both Guns N' Roses and grunge music, although it was not easy. The group Def Leppard started in 1976 as the band Atomic Mass in the city of Sheffield, England, by school friends Rick Savage, Tom Kenning, and Pete Doubleday. Pete Willis joined in 1977 along with Nick Mackley, Andy Nicholas, Melanie Davis, Nick Hornt, and Paul Hampshire, as members were joining and leaving all the time, mainly because all of them were still in high school. Singer Joe Elliott auditioned to become one of the guitarists, but it was decided that he would instead become the lead singer. Guitarist Steve Clark and drummer Rick Allen came on board soon thereafter in 1978. The name Def Leppard came from a newspaper headline that said, "Def Leppard, Def Leppard's Deformed." On July 18, 1978, Def Leppard, with the lineup of Elliott, Henning, Willis, Clark, Savage, and Allen, played their first gig in front of anywhere between 50 to 150 people at the Westfield School in Sheffield, England. That number has changed over the years with every interview that the guys do. It was a disco concert that was promoted by a guy named Bootleg Bill Coupland. He was called that because his bootleg record collection was legendary for the city. The story, according to Joe Elliott, was that Steve Clark was getting ready to quit the band if they didn't start getting gigs, so Joe asked Bootleg Bill if he could get the group a gig quickly since Steve decided that he was going to leave. They were so nervous that before the gig, they bought a bunch of beer and snuck it into the gig in the bass drum. Not really a great habit to start in Pete Willis and Steve Clark's cases, as you'll see later. They played 6 songs that they had worked up and then went off stage, which was actually just a bunch of tables kicked to the side, and got called out for an encore. They encored with Thin Lizzy's Jailbreak, and it was at that point that they decided that they needed to write more of their own music. Right around the time that they were working on their EP, the Def Leppard EP, Kenning left the band and was replaced by Frank Noon. By the time all of the band shuffling was finished and they released their debut album, the group consisted of Savage, Clark, Elliott, Allen, and Willis. The group released their debut album On Through the Night on March 14, 1980. The album originally did not do too well, except in the Sheffield area. Eventually, though, it caught on and at one time hit number 12 on the Billboard Albums chart. It also got the attention of legendary producer Mutt Lange, who produced AC/DC's iconic Back in Black album and would go on to craft Bryan Adams and Shania Twain's albums along with Marrying Shania, but that's for another day. Mutt took a liking to the band and would go on to produce the band's next few albums. Mutt and the band worked on the group's follow-up album High and Dry, which was released on July 11th, 1981. The band did not have an official hit from the album, and the sales figures were not all that spectacular. The band, however, did have a music video for their song Bringing On the Heartbreak, which would turn the song into a cult hit, as it was one of the first hard rock music videos that the fledgling TV channel MTV played. MTV would play a big part in the group's success with their third album. The group got to work on that third album, Pyromania. For this album, there were a few changes. The first was that they changed guitarists. Pete Willis was let go from the group for excessive drinking, something that would eventually help to claim the life of their other guitarist, Steve Clark. Told you that was a bad habit to start off with, putting beer into the bass drums to help calm your nerves before a gig. Never do that, kids. Guitarist Phil Collen came on board from the band Girl to replace Willis. The band also changed their sound to a more glam rock style instead of heavy metal. Mutt was again at the helm for this one. Pete Willis actually played most of the rhythm guitar and contributed songwriting on a few tracks before he was let go. This album was one of those rare cases when the album came out before the first single was released. Pyromania was released on January 20th, 1983. The first single, Photograph, was released on February 3rd, 1983. What made the song and eventually the album so popular was that Photograph, their second single, Rock of Ages, and their third single, Foolin', all getting heavy rotation airplay on MTV, which by then was in full swing as being a cultural force and a major record pusher. The album was the second biggest selling album of 1983, right behind that album by some guy who wore a sparkling single glove and danced the moonwalk. To date, Pyromania has sold over 10 million certified copies. Def Leppard began work on their follow-up album, Hysteria. However, tragedy struck when Rick Allen was involved in a car accident of his own making. On New Year's Eve 1984, Rick was driving his Corvette down a country road near Sheffield when he came up behind a slower car. Rather than slow up and get behind the other car, he tried to speed up to get around the car. Unfortunately for him, he lost control of his Corvette, hit a wall, and crashed the car into a field, completely severing his left arm. Doctors frantically tried to reattach the arm, but eventually he had to have it amputated once it got an infection. Normally, that would be the end for a drummer. After all, you do need your arms to play. Rick, however, was a different beast. Rather than quit the band, Rick and a few other people worked out a drum kit where he could drum with 2 feet and 1 arm. What's so amazing is that the band stuck by him and didn't even consider getting rid of him. The band did get another drummer to help Rick with drumming when they played a few tour warm-up gigs in Ireland, but they soon realized that Rick was going to be just fine, so the idea of a side drummer was squashed. In fact, during one gig, Rick drummed with one of the bones from his severed arm because, I don't know, rock and roll? Joe Elliott also developed vocal issues during this time, but again, the band stuck by him as well. This is a tight-knit group we're talking here. All of this pushed back the making of Hysteria, but the album finally got released on August 3rd, 1987. Hysteria was a monster hit, selling another 10 million records, producing hit songs like Pour Some Sugar on Me, Animal, Love Bites, Armageddon It, and Rocket, plus making Def Leppard one of the few artists to have more than one original album sell over 10 million copies. It also helped producer Mutt Lange to cement his place as one of the most successful producers of all time, after also having 10 million sellers with AC/DC and Shania Twain. After finishing up their successful Hysteria tour, they started work on their next album, Adrenalize. Tragedy, however, would strike the band again as guitarist Steve Clark's issues spiraled out of control. He tried to get help, but on January 8, 1991, Steve's demons caught up with him as he passed away. The band pressed on without him and released Adrenalized on March 31st, 1992. The album was a hit, although it wasn't as big a hit as Pyromania or Hysteria. It spawned the hits Let's Get Rocked, Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, and Heaven Is. Before they went out on tour again, they auditioned guitarists to take Steve Clark's place and found Vivian Campbell, who used to play in the bands Whitesnake and Dio. After that, the guys put out a bunch of different albums like Retroactive and Slang, but by this point, music had changed. Grunge took over and kicked Def Leppard's style of rock to the curb. Plus, they almost had yet another tragedy when Vivian Campbell was diagnosed with cancer, which he thankfully recovered from. Through it all, though, Def Leppard never lost their legion of fans, I count myself among them, and the guys continue to be huge concert draws. In fact, I've seen them twice. If you get the chance, go see them. Still to this day, they're a great live act. They also did a couple of Las Vegas residencies, and they still sell out arenas to this day, even if their albums don't sell 10 million copies like they used to. Throughout their career, Def Leppard released 12 albums, their last being 2022's Diamond Star Halos. They've been nominated for 7 American Music Awards, winning 2 of them in 1989. They were nominated for 6 MTV Video Music Awards, although they shockingly never won one, which is kind of weird. To date, they have not been nominated for a Grammy Award either, although they really should have been back in the 80s. All right, so the critics don't love them. Doesn't matter. They've sold over 100 million records, and they've been called the 31st greatest hard rock artists of all time, according to VH1. Plus, they're now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The career of one of my favorite bands, Def Leppard, which all started when they played their first gig at the Westfield School in Sheffield, England on July 18th, 1978.